Hello and welcome to Web Relates. Today we're looking at the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Our first story is by Apprehensive Lurker. That time Karen tried to bully another mom and got an eyeful. I, 33 female, unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, baby and I are doing great and we've now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa, the NICU. Now that we're home and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped bring some levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially preemies, is skin-to-skin time, which is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. Baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the NICU, right next to another baby and across from 2 others. A standard of care in the NICU is monitoring the baby's breathing, heart rate, and oxygen levels. These monitors look like an old-school tube TV and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches, and can display babies in other areas as well if the nurses need. So I'm new to this little care area, and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital-provided screen so I can get my skin-to-skin time, but realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. I ask the nurse if she can still see, or if my setup was blocking anything for her. Obviously, I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything was good, so I settle in for some much-needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel someone in my space, and look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, Karen starts in on me, while topless and holding a baby, so very vulnerable, about how I'm blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I try to explain I asked before setting things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture and get more aggressive and angry about how I'm causing her baby not to receive appropriate care, and am pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional stress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped, looked at the nurse, and told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, "It would seem that my privacy and modesty don't matter as much as Karen's comfort. Get rid of the screen." This pissed off Karen even more as she realized she'd have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She got very annoyed and uncomfortable, especially when the doctors managing rounds both got flustered and tried to insist I get a new screen. I may have been the butthole, but I simply was done, and stared right back and said, "According to my neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable. When I tell you, if looks could kill, I'd be dead. I'm not joking." The doctors didn't want to deal with it, and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all her baby's stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time she freaked out about this, but she pulled the same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby, until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everyone to look at my boobs is probably going to make me giggle every time I think of it. Our next story is from a deleted account. Principal told me to instruct courses I was not trained to teach or look for another job. So I did. I've been teaching for 6 years, and my last school for 2 years. I have a BA in history and MA in education. My principal and administrative staff pulled me out of one of my classes during an intense lecture I was giving and ambushed me in the hallway to ask/tell me I was going to teach IB classes next year. For those unaware, international baccalaureate courses are intense classes for high school students. They last from 1 to 2 years. These classes are intense, requiring what some teachers have said to be the time equivalent of a part-time job for them to plan and prepare, without additional pay and not part of my contract. For context, within the first 2 weeks of working at this school, I noticed the other side of the pendulum. The students with learning challenges were being pushed aside in order to achieve the principal's goals of becoming an elite IB school. I began advocating for these students and offered to teach co-taught classes with a special education teacher in order to help these students achieve. It was a great success, seeing many of the former troubled students actively being engaged in class, and through the grapevine, I was told I was one of their favorite teachers, since I got them. After the first semester, I heavily petitioned the staff to allow me to teach more of these specialized classes across my department. Here's the deal. There was no change in the curriculum, just in how I presented it to the shared class. Anyhow, the principal shot down my idea, but allowed me to continue with my lone class for the next year. Back to the present. After the ambush, I went home and talked it over with my wife. She is my rock, and understood that I was troubled with the additional task of basically adding an additional 15 hours of work a week to my schedule. She said, "Go with your heart." The next week, I scheduled a meeting with the principal. I told him I was unprepared to teach the IB course this year, but if he would give me this year to prepare the additional materials and create a curriculum, I would be good to go for the next. I also asked if there were any additional classes he would like for me to put together to teach next year. He said, "No, teach this course next year or look for another job." I asked about additional co-taught courses for the shared students who were overlooked. He said they were not important. I reminded him, yet again, I was currently working toward my PhD in history in order to teach college-level courses in high school, so students could get dual credit and a jump on college and tech schools. He laughed at me and said, I quote, "None of the additional education you have taken since you started working here benefits the school at all. No one cares." This took the wind out of me. I love teaching. All of the additional work, time and effort spent away from my family has been in order to be a better teacher, a better example for my students. I told him I would need to think about this, and quietly left the room. I took the next day off, spending time with my family and speaking with my therapist. I am very lucky to have a wonderful support system. I went back to work after that, and there were a number of staff that spoke to me privately. They agreed what he said was shameful. They shared that I was not the only teacher he spoke to this way, from changing failing grades to passing, to having teachers sponsor multiple extracurricular clubs without pay. I went to my union rep and added my statement to his ever-growing pile of staff statements about the principal. I assured him I was willing to go to the school board, etc. Just give me a call. Yep, I decided I was done. I wrote the principal an outstanding resignation letter, full of positivity and thanking him for the wonderful opportunity to work at his school and to have learned from his outstanding example of leadership. Did I also mention I forwarded the email to the entire staff? There was no way he could publicly respond negatively to my resignation, and he was furious. The majority of the staff knew what was going on. There were many smiles and fist bumps. I was told by the office staff later there were 5 other teachers that resigned, making this the biggest turnover in staff in a decade. The principal now has to go before the school board next month to explain what is happening at his school. I wonder if I'm going to get a call. Our next story is by One Piper Piping. Sure, everyone can come in. Friend of mine, who we'll call Buddy, said I could share this. So the background. Buddy worked for a company that got on the hybrid work-from-home train early. He got his job around 2012. These events take place around 2016. We live in New Jersey, and his office was in New York City. His contract said that he had to be in 1 day a week, same day each week, and up to 5 days a month, so 1 additional day on top of his weekly day. If work brought him in more than that, he got paid his hourly billable rate for his commute and any extra hours. His commute was 1.5 to 2 hours each way, so that could quickly add up to hundreds or thousands of hours. Other than a couple of full-time in-office folks, his co-workers had similar contracts and had to be in 1 to 8 times a month, and some lived as far away as Boston or DC. They worked in a well-paid niche consulting field, so I guess this was worth it to everyone. On to the story. Buddy's company has a client who is very old school and their point of contact is a jerk. On a video call, the client notices that some staff do not appear to be in the office, before Blur was as common, and demands that all of the work done for their contract be done in an office. Rants about professionalism. Buddy's manager simply says, okay. Manager calls a meeting afterwards with Buddy's team. He knows they're upset but asks them to prepare to come into the office daily for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Tells them to keep very careful track of receipts, costs, time, etc. and asks them to trust him. For the people who live further away, tells them he'll help set up accommodations for them, and their families if necessary. Because the company treats people well, everyone goes along with it with minor grumbling. About 5 weeks go by. Everyone is coming in daily. Remember when I said that most people didn't come in? So yeah, not much space in the office. The company liked teleworking because it allowed them to have a New York City headquarters, but not much space. Everyone keeps careful track of commuting costs, etc., time, and is getting reimbursed for their travel time and everything they are owed. This includes some folks who had contracts that covered lodging if they had to come in more than a day or two in a row. Then one day, the manager tells them they can go back to their regular schedule. Everyone notices Joe client is gone, but that the client company is still their client. Later on, Buddy finds out what happened. As per the terms of the contract, the client had to pay for all of that overage. Frustrating for the employees, but Buddy said no one was too mad knowing that it was temporary. Buddy's manager also knew that the same jerk point of contact had been a jerk. He had apparently gotten tired of being asked to sign contract modifications. Buddy said usually these were set at modifications over $1,000 or something, but this guy had thought these sign-offs were below him, and so set the threshold much higher, something like $100,000. Due to the wording of the contract, this was $100,000 per change, not total. So in the 5 weeks that everyone was coming in full-time, he had managed to cost his company a few $100,000. But since each individual employee was a single change, no one noticed until the next billing cycle. Jerk got called out by his own company, and they tried to contest the payment. Turns out the contract was very clearly written, and the client had to pay. On top of that, this is a pretty niche field, and so the client didn't really have many other options if they wanted to change consultants at that point. Jerk point of contact got fired, and according to Buddy's manager, couldn't really find work in their smallish field. Buddy and his co-workers got a nice chunk of money. I think that was a nice story, simply for the fact that we get to see the manager working with the employees instead of against them. Okay everyone, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers!